The biggest question I get is, how do I keep bugs out of my stockpile? Today, I'm specifically talking about flour and sugar. Now, bugs in flour are absolutely normal. The bugs that you get in flour are called weevils, and it happens all the time. There are several methods you can use to keep bugs out of your flour. First one is you can freeze it. Now, I've always heard 24 hours in the freezer, but when I went to go research just to make sure that was correct, a lot of places said 7 days to freeze your flour. So it's up to you to decide. You can do your own research and depending on how much time you have. But if you freeze your flour, it will kill all of the eggs that are in your flour. Guys, there's almost always bug eggs in your food, especially flour. It's just a common thing, so don't freak out about it. But if you freeze it, it will kill all of those eggs. The next thing you can do is bake it. You can put it on a cookie sheet and bake it for 35 to 40 minutes at 125 to 140 degrees. That will kill the eggs also. The next thing is to make sure that you store your flour in a dry, cool place in an airtight container so that if those bugs are coming in, they can't get into your flour because there's an airtight container. Now, some people say that if you put fresh bay leaves in your flour and around your flour, that will keep the weevils and the bugs out. I have never tried that, so I can't tell you if it works for sure, but a lot of our viewers recommended that. Now, what I do, I put diatomaceous earth all around my stockpile and in my buckets to keep all the bugs killed. Now, just so you know, don't freak out about diatomaceous earth. It sounds kind of weird, but diatomaceous earth is just the fossilized remains of tiny aquatic organisms called diatoms. Their skeletons are made of natural substances called silica. Over a long period of time, it accumulates in the sediment of the rivers, streams, and lakes, and then they go and mine this and use it as a pesticide. 26% of the Earth's crust is made up of silica by weight. Now, why do I like diatomaceous earth? First of all, it is a natural product, so it's actually not a pesticide. I mean, technically it's a pesticide, but it's not a chemical pesticide. You can use it on any bugs, and that's why I like it. It can be used to kill bed bugs, cockroaches, crickets, fleas, ticks, spiders, and many other pests. So that's why I like diatomaceous earth. And what I do is I just take a little bit and I just sprinkle it around the baseboards of the room where I'm storing my food. Then I store my flour, rice, sugar in these cat litter buckets that I had collected when we had 3 cats. I just store them in their regular packaging, and I sprinkle a little diatomaceous earth over the top. Then I close the lid, and then I sprinkle a little more diatomaceous earth on the top of the closed lid. Now, the best way to store your flour and sugar and rice, most of your grains actually, is in a hard plastic bucket with an airtight seal. The reason why I really like diatomaceous earth is it is pretty much safe to eat anything. If you happen to ingest it, it just goes right through your system, kills any parasites you might have along the way, and you just poop it out. It's not a big deal. You may want to wear a mask while sprinkling it so that you don't get it in your lungs, but I just am really careful. I try not to poof the dust everywhere. I just lightly sprinkle it. I'm not just throwing the dust. And so that's one of the reasons why I like the diatomaceous earth. The other reason is, why make things more complicated than you have to? One thing that Mom and I have noticed is that people make food storage so complicated that they get overwhelmed and then they don't want to do it. Like, I hear prepper after prepper say you have to bring your flour home and you have to either vacuum seal it or put it in food storage bags or all of this other stuff. If it doesn't need to be done, don't waste your time and energy doing it. That will just discourage you from getting your stockpile ready. Now, I've had tons of criticism from people because I have my sugar just sitting out and my flour just sitting out in my basement, and people absolutely have freaked out and reamed me up one side, down the other for not properly packaging my food storage and I'm giving people bad advice. Guys, I live in Wyoming. I used to live in Colorado. I also used to live in Kansas, Texas, and Idaho. Wyoming, Colorado, Idaho. We do not have bugs like Kansas and Texas did. My food storage is different here than it was in Kansas and Texas. So in Kansas and Texas, I took a little bit more time, made sure I had pesticide in every room, in all the corners, around the baseboards to kill everything. But here in Wyoming, in Colorado and Idaho, we did not have to do that. We just do not have bugs like some people have down in the South. So once again, don't make your food storage more complicated than it needs to be. I just set my sugar out because I don't have a problem with ants or roaches or anything like that. My sugar is fine on the shelf. It may get a little bit of moisture. If it does, I just break it up or grate it up or use chunks of sugar like in my tea, or if I'm making cookies like no-bake cookies, the sugar will just boil down like normal. It's no big deal if your sugar gets hard. So keep it simple. If you need to do those extra steps of repackaging stuff because you live in an area where you have a bug problem, then go ahead and do that. But if you live in the West where it's dry, you really don't have to worry about repackaging all of this stuff. The next thing you can do for your flour and your sugar is to store them in 5-gallon buckets lined with a Mylar bag and put oxygen absorbers in there. Now, this is a very okay way to store it. But once again, going back to keeping things simple, I don't need to do that here. I do not want to keep flour for 25 years. If you want to keep flour for 25 years, you go right ahead. But my pantry is a working grocery store. I am continually eating out of my pantry and then just replacing what I've eaten. So I always have about 2 years worth of flour and sugar on hand at any given time. But I don't go and store it long term. First of all, I'm not planning on being here 25 more years. I don't think it's going to happen. So why am I wasting my valuable energy now to store something when I'm not going to even be here? But once again, we don't have a bug problem. We don't have a moisture problem. So I don't need to go to that extra step of the Mylar bags and oxygen absorbers. Now, if you want to, that's fine. Go ahead and do it. I just don't want to pay the extra expense for the special 5-gallon lids that open and close, the Mylar bags and the oxygen absorbers. To me, I'd rather spend that money on more canned foods. You can use metal tins like popcorn tins that have a tight seal. You can use ceramic jars that have a tight seal. Glass jars, you can use large spice jars. Plastic nut containers, you know, the big container of nuts that you get at Costco, you can store it in those types of things. You can also vacuum seal it and store it that way. As far as storage buckets go, I try to never pay for storage buckets if I can avoid it. So like when we had the 3 cats, I bought their cat litter in these big buckets because I knew that I was going to need buckets for my food storage. So I specifically bought these containers in mind for my food storage later. All I did was just rinse them out, wipe them dry, let them sit for 24 hours to make sure they were perfectly dry. Then I just stacked in my rice, my flour, and my sugar if I was putting it in there. I found this one at a garage sale. I got it for 50 cents. It will work perfectly for stacking spaghetti. When you're looking for containers, think ahead of time. I had spaghetti stacked in here and I just neatly stacked each package in here. I got about 30 or 40 packages of angel hair pasta and spaghetti in this container. So try to get containers that your food will fit snugly in there. Now, if you want to make sure you keep it more airtight, you can throw an oxygen absorber in there if you would like. But once again, I don't think that's a necessary step, but it's just an extra precaution if you want to. Now, a lot of people recommend dry canning your flour. Put it in a canning jar and then you put it in the oven, bake it, and then it dry cans your flour. That's actually, I think, the worst way to store flour. First of all, you're wasting valuable canning jars on something that's super inexpensive like flour. If I were canning, I would use it for something that is more expensive like meats, like chicken or beef, and I would use those valuable canning jars for canning my meats instead of a super cheap ingredient like flour, sugar, or rice. So I would not waste my time canning flour. Plus, they say that there is a risk of botulism because there's still a small amount of moisture in your flour, and you really don't want to be sealing that in. You know, that's up to you. Personally, I eat raw eggs and I eat raw flour with no problem. I mean, how many people have actually died from salmonella or botulism in flour and eggs in the last year? Now, what do you do if you get flour bugs, also called weevils, in your pantry? First of all, you will see them crawling around. It's really gross, I know. Now, if the fecal matter hits the oscillation unit and we really have no food left, do not throw that flour out. Just put the flour in a sifter and sift out the bugs. I know that sounds gross, but just sift out the bugs and use the flour. I would make sure the flour is used in baked ingredients, in your bread, in your cookies, in any biscuits, anything baked. That way it will kill any bacteria that the bugs may have left in your flour. But don't waste it. If it comes to a true starvation, we really have no food left, you can use that flour, just sift it out. To get rid of the bugs in your pantry, clear everything out, then you're gonna vacuum up as much as you can of all the debris, the bugs, anything like that. I would immediately throw away anything like pasta and that's a little bit harder to save, to reuse. But anything like that, I would put it in a trash bag, tied up outside. Do not keep it in the house. Put it in your outside trash to get rid of it immediately. Then, if you're really worried about it, you can spray your trash can with an insecticide or sprinkle diatomaceous earth over the top of the bag in the trash. Now, next, you need to wipe down all the shelves. Now, my mom used to have this problem in Kansas, so when we would get an infestation of weevils, she would take the brown bottle of Lysol. It's a disinfectant, but it's still safe to use in your pantry. She would take the brown bottle of Lysol and wipe down full strength everything in the cabinets. That will kill any eggs that you missed that are still in the pantry. Then you're gonna let that dry, and then you're going to re-put all of your food back in the pantry. If you need to put it in jars or seal it in plastic containers, go ahead and do that now. Now don't forget, before you put everything back in your pantry, if you have contact paper or any kind of shelf lining at all, you need to rip all of that out before you wipe down with your Lysol, okay? So make sure that every single surface, even the walls, everything is wiped down with that brown Lysol to make sure all of the eggs are killed. Before my last tip, I want to tell you that I have a free practical stockpile e-cookbook. You can get the link in the description below at livingonadime.com, and it's totally free for you. Another question I get asked all the time is, how long can I use my flour past the expiration date? Usually it can go 18 months to 2 years, depending on, I mean, sometimes 1 year to 18 months, but try to just use it as quickly as you can. But if your flour has expired, do not throw it away. You can go ahead and use it, and you can tell if it's bad because it will smell off. It's just kind of a strange, spoiled smell. That's how you know if your flour is too old to use. Now, once again, if you're just totally out of food, you can still use the spoiled flour. It won't hurt anything, especially if you're baking it. Baking kills all the bacteria. So if you just really don't have any food, you're gonna be eating that spoiled flour anyway. So don't freak out. If it's spoiled, you can still use it. Please go watch this video next on more food storage ideas. We will see you guys next time.